This training video is going to cover the block movement system. The block movement system basically is an ability for players to command large numbers of figures or miniatures, move them in the rear areas, and bring them up towards the contact point on the front line. It saves the player actually having to march their individual figures across large spanses of the tabletop until they get to contact with the enemy. It also provides a capability of limited intelligence as to what and where units are deployed, what type of units are actually being utilized, and their abilities against the opponent. It can also have a system of dummies or misdirection of information. The key thing is that for the ease of the player to march large numbers of figures, utilizing a single wood block up until the point when they get within combative ranges. As you see before you today, we have two typical armies deployed for battle. Neither side is using the block movement system as we see. On the right side we have the Austrians, and on the left side we have some Prussians. Starting with the Prussian force. On their left flank we have a cavalry brigade or division of 4 cavalry regiments and a brigade artillery battery or horse battery. Moving to their right we have a Prussian Landwehr or reservist brigade of 3 regiments all told, including the corps headquarters and the skirmishers to the forefront. Lastly, to their right we have another Prussian infantry brigade with some attached Landwehr cavalry, consisting of 2 Landwehr cavalry regiments and 2 Prussian infantry regiments of 3 battalions each. Overall, we have 3 Prussian infantry commands, 2 infantry and 1 cavalry for the makeup of the Prussian force on this tabletop. Now let's go to their Austrian opponents. The Austrians on their left flank have a mixed infantry cavalry force, typically a light brigade or light division, in this case an Uhlan regiment and some Grenzers, and an attached cavalry battery. Moving to their right we have 2 grenadier battalions in column, and then the bulk of the Austrian infantry of 3 line regiments, 3 battalions each, along with some corps artillery and the corps headquarters, skirmishers and officers to the forefront. Moving off to their right, we have an Austrian cavalry division or brigade of 3 regiments of line dragoons. This completes the Austrian force. So in summary, the Austrians have got 2 infantry brigades or commands and a cavalry division or brigade here on the far right. All told, 3 commands. And with that said, we now can pan back to the actual tabletop action of both sides. Formerly you saw both armies deployed on this tabletop. You could easily count out how many battalions were involved, how many cavalry regiments, how many batteries, what size, the strength of the respective formations. In other words, you pretty much had total information. The only thing you might not have done was their actual evaluations for the combat. But overall, you can have a pretty good sense as to what exactly you were facing. But now you're faced with the wood blocks. In fact, you even have a hard time trying to figure out which side is the Prussians and which side is the Austrians. But the Austrians are on the right side of your screen, and the Prussians are on your left, in the same locations as they were before. But now each individual command, basically a brigade or division, is represented by a wood block. As you can see, you really can't tell which of these wood blocks is a cavalry, or it's an infantry, or maybe a mixture. You don't even know if they're actually real, because we do utilize dummies or decoy type blocks on the tabletop. The other major advantage of the wood block system is it allows us to move the forces in the rear areas up until the point of actual combat on the tabletop. And at that point in time, we substitute the wood blocks with the actual figures, which you'll see in the upcoming segments of this training video. But as you can see right now, your intelligence has been limited, and that's one of the key components of the wood block system. The other key component, of course, it allows us to move much larger scale sized armies on the tabletop. So those rear area forces which take up time to march the figures actually across the tabletop is no longer applicable. All you need to do now is move the wood block. Now in the next moment I'm going to actually put a grid on top of this tabletop, And this grid is what actually controls the block movement. In addition, this grid also determines the visibility and also determines the scouting or information reports that you get based upon what level of command, or if you're a scout, and your ability to see the wood blocks, which gives you information as to what their size or component parts are. I've placed a grid overlay on top of my gaming board. These are 1-foot squares using a white string. Now normally this string would not be utilized on the gaming board at all. The squares would be delineated by the actual gaming tiles or by little marks actually found on the gaming board itself. So it's easy for a player to determine where the center point, or the corners, shall we say, of the grid pattern is. As you can see, each side's got the blocks in the respective grid squares. And coming over to the Austrian side, we still have the same formations, but now represented by the wood blocks. Starting off with their light brigade on the left flank, then their infantry division in the middle, with the corps headquarters with a small block representation. Notice the extend arrow, which basically means that this brigade, or division in this case, is both in this grid and this grid. Equal strength on each side. 50% of the command would be in this grid, 50% would be in this grid. And last but least, we have the Austrian cavalry on the right flank. Going over to the Prussians on the other side, on their right flank, we have their Prussian brigade. If you remember, the landwehr cavalry was extended over into this grid. So the infantry is here. Got a 12-inch ruler there just to show that these are 1-foot square grids. Their other Prussian brigade, along with their corps headquarter marker, being represented by this small square here. And last but least, up on the hill, if you remember, was the Prussian cavalry.